Welcome to the Less Doing podcast, where you will learn how to start living more by doing less.
Let me help you optimize, automate, and outsource your entire life so you can focus on doing the things you love.
Now here's your host, Ari Mizell.
Welcome back to the Less Doing podcast. I'm your host, Ari Mizell, and my guest today lives life 1 second at a time. Cesar Kuriyama created the app 1 second every day. He's given a TED Talk. He is a friend, and we're in a group of entrepreneurs together, which is where I know him from. And I'm excited to have him here today. So, hey, Cesar.
Hey, man. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, thanks. And I know you've had a really busy week getting some stuff going with the app. So thank you for taking the time to talk to me. For those who don't know, let's talk about what the app is and sort of how you got the idea to do it in the first place.
Sure. So the quick version is I was working in advertising for many years, and I was looking essentially for a way out. I was working 100-hour work weeks all the time. I didn't really have time to, really actually live my life in any meaningful way. And I thought, what is my exit strategy here? So one day I was watching a TED Talk by a guy who went to my school, Stefan Sagmeister. It was called The Power of Time Off. And what he made me realize in his talk was that I was never going to have the headspace to come up with really figure out what I wanted to do with my life if I was spending all my headspace thinking about this job that consumed all my life and time. So I instead of making a plan of what I was going to do next, I just made a plan to take time off. So I saved up for 2 years. I opened up a bank account that I didn't touch, and I had half my paycheck go into that bank account. And I basically just for 2 years lived frugally, didn't spend money unnecessarily on anything. I canceled all the cable and all the things and whatever it took to be able to survive in New York for 2 years, which included drinking out of a flask when I went out to bars with friends and, just save every dime. And when I turned 30, I quit my job and I started a year off from work. And during the time leading up to this year off, I knew that it might potentially be the only year in my life where I had the total freedom to do whatever I wanted. So I thought, well, what is a meaningful way for me to find it, to look back on this year and not remember and not forget it. I am someone who's always been frustrated with my memory throughout my life, and I tried multiple times to start a journal or a diary, and I would do it for 2 or 3 days, and then I would just stop because I would forget, or I would be paralyzed by this idea, by this time that it would require for me to jot down what today meant to me or whatnot. So I've always been a visual guy. I had directed a music video a couple of years prior to quitting my job and in my spare time. And I worked in visual effects and animation. And so I thought, my headspace has always been visual. So I thought, well, whatever I'm going to do this year to remember this year off by, it needs to be visual. It needs to be with video. At the time, this is 2011, the iPhone camera had gotten pretty damn good and it shot in HD finally. And I thought, well, I can't be too lazy any given day to record at least 1 second of it. And that'll culminate in a 6-minute video of that year. And that'll make a pretty absorbable video that I can look back on often, as opposed to a hard drive full of photos and videos that I rarely ever look at. So that's kind of how the idea started, and the idea was to do it for that year off, so so I'll never forget a day of that year. I didn't want to turn 40 one day and only sort of remember what that year off was like. I wanted to make sure I could meaningfully look back on it. And when I was thinking back at that moment in time about my life at 20, it was already a giant blur, and so I knew I needed to do this. And it wasn't supposed to be anything other than my little way to capture my year. But after just a couple of weeks of doing it, I realized what a positive effect it was having on not just my memory, but on how I was spending my time. And at that point, I realized, well, I doubt I'll not have an iPhone in my pocket anymore anytime soon. So I should just do this for the rest of my life. It's so easy to do. It takes almost zero time per day. And at this point now, I personally am about to hit 7 years. It'll be 7 years in February. And it's like a 40-minute video at this point, and I've not forgotten a day of my life since I started. And so that part worked. And a year later, I spoke at the TED conference. I shared the idea at TED 2012, and it kind of took off from there. The number one comment people had was, I want to do this too. So I thought, hey, maybe I don't have to go back to work in advertising. Maybe I can build an app that makes it easy for anybody to do this type of a project. We funded it through Kickstarter, got the most backers ever for an app on Kickstarter. Over 11,000 people backed it. And that was basically 5 years ago right now. And we've not raised money since that point. We've just been able to kind of grow as we could afford it. Today we're a team of 9, and we are fully distributed. And we are essentially trying to turn 1 second every day into just the most meaningful diary period for anyone out there who wants to have a meaningful way to look back at their life.
It's pretty powerful stuff, I have to say. And one question I have is how often do you go back and look through previous days, weeks, years, whatever?
Actually, not very often. I would say maybe twice a year. There's this interesting
birthday.
What's that? Sorry,
Birthday?
Not necessarily. Like that would make sense. I should just say, hey, it's my birthday. I'm going to reflect on my life today. But it's not typically my birthday. But maybe it's around that time. There just tends to be like a moment of like. It's happened pretty randomly throughout the years where I'm just like, I get all nostalgic or I'm looking back or thinking back on something. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of feel like I think one trigger for me has been like, if I'm going through like a rough patch, which happens multiple times in any given year. And I think looking back at the ups and downs of life over a course of years in a couple of minutes is a really good way to get perspective on whatever's going on right now.
And then how are you choosing which second is going to be the one that represents that day and reminds you of that day?
Yeah, that's maybe been one of the top 3 questions I've received since this project started. I think a lot of our users find that to be like the question. We've certainly had a lot of people over the years, not do the project because they thought it gave them anxiety to what is the moment of today, which I've always found really interesting. And we're actually releasing stuff in like 2 weeks that'll hopefully alleviate some of that. But personally, I personally don't. I definitely started out by giving it like a lot of thought and being very mindful of it. But over time, I realized that it really didn't matter that much what I recorded. It's just it's always just essentially a memory trigger. So, so long as the thing reminds me of what I'm trying to remember about that day, it doesn't matter to me that I recorded the moment, So one example that we try to give our users is, that I think one of our reminders is something along the lines of like, it's better to record something that reminds you of the moment than to like not enjoy the moment because you were busy recording it. So it's for me personally, it's become less important to as an example. This is not a great example, but if there's an event going on and there's this like moment everybody's waiting for at the event, and then everybody's got their phones out, right? I'd rather just enjoy the thing at the moment, and then just record before and after that moment because I'll still remember that moment, right? That's the thing that's kind of at least for me the priority. But all our users have different ways to different rules for themselves on how they capture a moment. And we certainly have a lot of users who pick certain themes for how they capture their life that, like any, it's a journal, so it's a diary. So people kind of find their own voice with it.
Yeah. And the other thing is, for those who haven't used the app, and I well, for those who haven't used the app, if you can go back and like look at videos you took yesterday or just photos, right, and use those if you want to.
Yeah, we have essentially the app automatically organizes all your photos and videos by the day in which they were shot. And so it makes it really easy to just go in there, and it's all already organized. So you click on any given date. It looks like a calendar essentially, and you go and you grab the moments from each day that you're essentially trying to log for that day. Today, yeah, we essentially we created a button called Flux years ago that essentially, users always had sorts of issues with like, oh, my wife recorded this video, of our son, and it's showing up as today because she emailed it to me today, but the video is actually from yesterday. And we wanted to remove all that technical crap out of it. And so, yeah, basically you can use any video in your camera roll. One of my favorite little examples of why, at least in our experience, people aren't really ever trying to necessarily cheat. Like, I'm just going to use that from yesterday today. It tends to be more personal as to why they end up using videos from other days on a given day. So, for example, I got an email one time from a guy who was distraught that after years of doing 1SC, he missed a day. And he said, "Oh my God, I was out yesterday with a bunch of old friends. We drank way too many margaritas. I woke up with a hangover, and I can't believe it. I just forgot to record something yesterday. I can't believe it. It's been 2 years. And he was freaking out. And I said, look, man, just Google image, like an image of a margarita, record that off your screen, make that your second of that day, with Flux or whatever. And the important part is that you remember that night out with your margaritas where you're having so much fun, you didn't even remember to record something. Like actually recording that moment is like beside the point, it's fine. Like, it's just
it's very meta, honestly.
Yeah.
No, but it's important. It's true. It's like, because my dad is an example of someone who was always, he like never took pictures of anything, like when we were on trips or stuff, because he was always like, I want to remember it with my mind. And of course now he doesn't remember things, but it's a fair point, right? Like you want to be in the moment, not like watching the moment, watching your life go by. So those things that can spark the memories are really fascinating. The other thing that is really worth pointing out here is that I know this from talking to you, but you people have been doing this for years now, and there's so much work done right now in literature and research and devices to help people form habits, and you've formed a very strong habit in people.
Yeah, there's a lot to say about that.
That's not an easy thing.
Yeah, trust me. We know it's a struggle. It's been a struggle for 5 years to continue to figure out how to best build these habits for people. And yeah, the on the one hand we have 5-year users, because the anniversary of the app is essentially this coming January 13th or 11th. But our Kickstarter launched in November of 2012. So one of the main things that I told people during that Kickstarter, when those 11,000 people backed it, was, look, like you could start recording right now. When you get the app, you'll be able to log the moments. Like you don't have to start on the day you get the app. You'll be able to just select anything you record starting now. So we have people essentially who have hit that mark already, even though the app hadn't come out yet, because they took what I said to heart and started recording in that moment. So, one guy just sent us his like website, which has every single year logged, and we're trying to come up with ways to, one thing we haven't done, which is like, it's ironically is something we should do to help form these habits is be better about identifying milestones in your project throughout time. So when somebody hits 5 years, we should essentially be giving you the biggest, medal of all time in that app that says like, you just hit 5 years of 1 second every day. And we haven't done that yet. There's a lot of this. That's one of the many things we're working on right now to make sure that we let you know about these very gigantic specific milestones. But on the other hand, we also have there's research being done by a couple of groups actually about the effect 1 second every day is having on our users. There's one group in the UK that is essentially exploring how 1 second every day is affecting the happiness of people who use 1 second every day versus somebody who doesn't.
I'm sure, yeah.
And there's another one that is based in DC that they are essentially scanning the brains of our users as they watch their 1 second every day playback to see what effect, what kind of an effect being able to like rewatch your own life is having on people. On yourself. I can speak anecdotally about myself and say, like, I've not forgotten a day of my life for 7 years. And, each one of these memory triggers, and I can explain the science of memory and why getting these triggers occasionally reinforces the, neurons or blah, blah, blah. But this research will hopefully be able to shed some like genuine scientific light into why this stuff is working, hopefully,
Well, and do you, is there like a particular time of day that you have this as part of your routine?
For me, when I record my second.
Oh, so it's just whenever the moment hits you.
Oh yeah. It could be first thing in the morning or it could be at night. It's really, more often than not, it tends to be pretty obvious just looking at my calendar. If like, we're like, like this, like you mentioned earlier, we've been extraordinarily busy the past couple of weeks with our biggest update ever that we need to get it out. We want to get it out before Christmas. And so, I was just logging a couple of seconds and like, it's like Sunday and Monday. It's just me in front of my computer, like editing videos. So, not that those days are not obvious. It's just the end of the day. And I'm like, all I did today was work. And I just, recorded my screen. But sometimes my calendar, my Google Cal gives me like a quick, like, oh, my second will probably be that, but you never know. Like last night I had a coffee with a friend and we had a really awesome conversation about some stuff we may or may not do together. And I didn't plan on recording a second, but I was like, I gotta grab this. Cause like in 5 years, this conversation might be a big deal, but yeah. So yeah, I don't really have a set rhythm for it.
And so you said this is the biggest update to the app ever. Can you talk about what some of those updates are?
Yeah, it's a couple of phases essentially we're going to be rolling out over the course of a couple of months. But this is like kind of like what we could get out before Christmas, and it includes just a substantial aesthetic redesign of the app. We're making it iPhone X compatible. We're making it so that you can have more than 1 second per day. You can have 2 now if you really need it. Removing this point of anxiety that I was mentioning earlier. Some people would be so like the idea that you can only have one would force people to continue to push it off throughout the day because they were looking for something better, which is like not the it's not ideal. It's not the kind of feeling we wanted to give anyone. Like no, this isn't it. Like because later I'll do this, and then they'll forget later, and then it's just.
I'm sorry to tell you, Cesar, but I'm actually been working on an app called Half a Second every day.
yeah, man, all good, man. I'm pro seconds per day, no problem. Yeah, we also a good friend of mine played like an April Fool's joke on us like a couple of years ago, where he started blasting 2 seconds every day everywhere, as like his competing version of the app. But yeah, the second thing is essentially an opt-in thing where, I would say that even myself, having been using the app for 7 years or whatever, or doing it, there are days where like maybe there are occasions where two very like significant moments of my life happened, and I as the guy who like came up with the rules, I'm frustrated that I have to pick one of the two. And it's like, why not just have the two that day? Like I want those two things are equally worth remembering. And of course, we'll have edge cases. We'll have somebody who's like, well, screw it, I'm just going to do 2 seconds every day from now on.
Right.
But we're not going to not let that guy do that just so that like, the majority can't like occasionally get the thing they need.
Yeah, I still am stuck on this thing though that you basically hacked a way for people to start a daily habit. And honestly, if you can start a daily habit in one thing, it makes it a lot easier to start a daily habit in another thing, because one of the easiest, generally the easiest ways to instill a new habit is to attach it to another habit.
Right.
You could say like anytime I do a 1 second recording, then I have to do this other thing, whatever that might be.
Right.
Text somebody I love, whatever we want it to be. But it's really incredible that you've been able to do that. So like honestly, kudos to you.
So going back to your previous question, so habit tracking is something we've built into the app, into this new version, and we couldn't quite make it be what we wanted it to be for before Christmas, so we kind of turned it off. But it's coming very soon after New Year's. It's essentially, like you said, we at our core, we're trying to help. We ideally are hoping to try to help people live their best life. That's kind of one of our core missions is to be the app for a life well lived, and stop building better or minimizing worse habits is something we want to try to tackle. And so we have like an MVP of our first little attempt at starting to make that stuff happen. And so yeah, that's coming, and I agree with you 100%.
That's awesome. So Cesar, the last question that we always like to ask on these interviews is, what are your top 3 pieces of advice for people to be more effective? And you can interpret that however you like.
Wow, that's a good question. Let's see, man. I'll try to just see whatever comes off the top of my head. I personally would probably say that if most of the time when I go with my gut, instead of spending weeks and months over analyzing something, it tends to work out better. But but that's actually like at least for me, it's a tough thing. It's still tough. I got even giving myself my own advice. I have a hard time I have a hard time following it because I do tend to want to overanalyze everything. It just historically, looking back on any time I just went with my initial gut right away, as opposed to like overthinking it over a span of time, it has almost always worked out better. So I think for startup land, it's particularly useful because of the nature of just trying to like gather feedback as soon as possible, as opposed to thinking you have the right answer and hoping like, waiting a couple of months to see if you were right. What else? I think I'm sure a lot of people on your podcast will say something similar, but I think there's so much to be learned about whatever it is that's on your mind, from just like finding like the best possible book or the best 2 or 3 possible books for it. There's just so much. There's so much that other people have spent their lives figuring out that they can distill to you in like 2 to 3 hours, that you don't want to spend a couple of years of your life figuring it out on your own. It's books are great. And what else? I guess I'd mention that our company, like I mentioned in the intro or whatnot, our company's fully distributed, and we're still figuring out the best means of continuing to grow as a distributed company. But we've been trying to learn from other bigger companies and more successful companies that have been doing it for longer than us. And I would say, as far as being effective, there's like anything else, there's pros and cons for any of these things. And I think we have found a lot of pros in for ourselves in our quality of life, as far as having I think our effectiveness is really it's hard to quantify it, and that's one of the reasons why these things sometimes don't take off right away. But it's hard to quantify why everyone in the company right now is better off as having a system of work where it's really about the results and not about the time you put in. We're trying to follow the creed of, like, if your job is X and 1 week you had to work 100 hours, like right now, because we're trying to get a huge update done. But like, if 1 week you were just as effective working 20 hours, but you were able to spend more time with your family and going and spending time with your friends, like we're all just the happiness that it gives each and every one of us, like, comes through in the work we do. So it's a tough thing to quantify, but I think it's something that doesn't get enough attention with how people run their companies.
Yeah, awesome. Those are great, and they are unique. So thank you. So we're gonna have links to everything in the show notes. But is there anything particular you want to point people to, since you are having this big update coming out?
Yeah, the app. It's worth noting that the iOS version is the version that we spend all our developmental efforts on. I think we're still trying to nail iOS before we really take the considerable effort it'll take to do it on Android, right? We are available on Android, but we don't update it often. It's something that we mostly just work on squashing bugs as much as possible. Video is a considerable difficult beast for something like Android, because it's there's so many Android devices and all of them handle video a little bit differently. So it's something we want to do we really want to focus on in 2018, but it's also free on Android. So, hey, there's nothing to lose. We're really excited to have this new update coming out. I'm not sure when this is going live, but it might be out by then. We're trying to get it out by Monday, we think. And Monday, December 17th.
Yeah, this will be all right after that then.
Sweet. Yeah. We're really looking forward to, we're changing all our onboarding, all this stuff to reflect all these changes. And so we're going to be paying attention to see if this continues to kind of help people build this habit, which is something that we've been working on for a long time. And so far, we've made, little strides throughout the years that have all culminated in like giant strides, and as far as getting people to stick around and keep doing it. So we're really excited, and hopefully nothing breaks.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, thank you again, Cesar. This has been great, and quite honestly, I've fallen off the wagon on my 1 second every day, so that's going to change today. I'm actually going to go back through anyway, because I have 4 kids. The last few weeks or the last few years have definitely been worth noting. So thank you.
Yeah, one thing you could do actually is we built this just out of curiosity. We built this with this little button on the new version where it looks like a dice, and you just click it, and it'll just create your calendar for you, with whatever's just sitting in your camera roll. So it's just, we hope it'll just get somebody started, somebody who either has fallen off the wagon or somebody who is coming into the app for the first time and is laying on an empty calendar. So yeah, give that a shot.
Awesome. Oh, I'm absolutely gonna do that right away. So thanks again.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on the Less Doing podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your friends. For more information about Ari and his groundbreaking methods, please visit us online at lessdoing.com and on social media at Ari Mizell. We'll see you next week.